In this video, I'll explain how to simplify the following types of expressions where you have one sign in front of each number. There's a plus in front of the 5 if nothing's written. Sometimes there's two signs in front of a number. Okay, and also a little more involved, some have two signs in front of a number. Right here the 7 only has one sign, 6 only has one sign. We'll cover all these examples. What I recommend is that you learn to read the shorthand of mathematics. No operation sign is required for addition or subtraction. Such problems can be solved with one of two rules, and in fact you're already familiar with the rules. A couple examples: if it was, say, 6 below 0 temperature, you would write that as a -6. If someone said, hey, it dropped 4 more degrees, you would represent that with a -4, and the temperature outside would be a -10. Okay? If the signs are the same, you add and you keep the sign. All right? Another possibility with the signs different. If you owe someone $20, you would represent that with a -20. And if you paid them 5, you would represent that with a +5. And you still owe 15, or you would represent what you owe with a -15. And in this case, the signs are different, so you subtract. I want to emphasize that in both these cases, I did not write an operation sign here. We added. This is the key to the shorthand of mathematics. I did not write a subtraction sign here, but we knew to subtract. The idea is that the operation sign is understood by default. Let me explain. When you were first introduced to addition and subtraction, they taught you to read the operation sign and then solve it. So the operation sign was placed right between the numbers, and year after year they gave you problems that you could solve by only looking there. The process was reinforced for years, but it is misleading. Okay? They never gave you a problem like either of these, because here the answer would be -7, and here the answer would be -11, and they didn't want to talk about negative numbers. What happens is you learned to only look between the numbers, when in fact you have to look in front of each number. You have to look in front of each number to know whether you add or subtract. Okay, the main idea is going to be, we're not going to write an operation sign. Whenever the signs are the same, we'll add. Signs are the same, we add. This yields -16. The signs are the same, we add. We get a +16. So you always keep the sign when you add. Signs are the same, you add, and you keep the sign. Okay? When the signs are different, you subtract, and you keep the sign of the larger. This is essentially the same problem as this, and the answer is the same. So I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by it's addition or subtraction by default. Okay, so we'll take a look down here. By default, if I want you to multiply or divide, I have to put something on the paper that indicates multiplication. All right, so at this point this is still addition or subtraction. If I put a dot here, now it means to multiply, and the result would be -48. By the way, real quick, the multiplication rules, it's the same for division, but when you multiply a positive times a positive, you get positive. Negative times negative gives you a positive. Positive times negative gives you a negative, and those are the cases we'll be looking at, or more precisely, negative times a positive gives you a negative. All right, on this next example, if I put parentheses here, this would indicate multiplication, and the result would still be negative 48. Or if I put two sets of parentheses next to parentheses, that's math shorthand for multiply, this would be negative 48. And one situation where parentheses could be there, but it wouldn't be multiplication, if someone put parentheses around the 12, this does not indicate multiplication. This is still addition or subtraction. So the answer here, the signs are different. You would subtract, keep the sign of the larger. Okay, all right, and that's because there's a sign next to the parenthesis instead of a number next to the parenthesis. Okay, also on the idea of by default, if I want you to divide these two numbers, I could put in a division sign, and then the result here would be a negative 3. Or I could put a slash, a fraction bar, and that would also mean division, and that would be negative 3. Well, if the signs are the same, you add. If they're different, you subtract. If I want you to do anything besides addition or subtraction, I have to put in some symbol to indicate that. Okay, so these are the rules for addition and subtraction. It requires that you have one sign in front of each number. Whenever the signs are the same, you add, you keep your sign. Whenever the signs are different, you subtract, and you keep the sign of the larger. And subtraction always involves putting the larger number on top. You might want to write these rules down. We'll be referring to them, and we'll try solving. Let's start out with just 4 problems and using those rules. If you want to hit pause, go ahead. I'm going to solve these rather quickly right now. Signs are different, subtract, keep the sign of the larger. Signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. The signs are different, you subtract, keep the sign of the larger. And the signs are different, so you subtract and keep the sign of the larger. Okay, again, if you want to hit pause and try these quickly, that'd be fine. I'm going to go ahead and solve them right now. Signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. Signs are different, you subtract, keep the sign of the larger. The signs are different, you subtract, keep the sign of the larger. Signs are different, you subtract, keep the sign of the larger. And again, this 9 has a plus in front of it, or a positive sign. Those words are interchangeable, but you're just not required to write it. If you're doing well with these, that's fine. If you would like a little more practice, if you're on my website, mrbeformath.com, it's a free website, you can download worksheets, and I have a couple of them basically like this, with a lot of problems you can work at solving. Let's go. So you would start out just trying it with one sign in front of each number, and later in the video we'll get to these more complicated cases. I always include a detailed answer key to go with these. Okay, we'll work with some numbers that are a little bit larger now. Again, if you want to pause the video and try them yourself, that would be fine. I'll go ahead and solve them presently. Signs are different, we'll subtract. You always have to put the larger number on top. And you keep the sign of the larger. The answer is going to be a negative. I do not put the operation sign up here because I'm going to subtract, and if I put a negative or a minus in front of that 35, it's going to be confusing. Okay? Don't write the operation sign, it'll just cause confusion. Have to borrow. So that's our answer, negative 57. Signs are different, we'll subtract. And the answer is positive because the larger number is positive. Signs are the same, we'll add. And we'll keep the sign. So the answer is going to be negative. Again, don't put the operation sign there. Cause confusion. And for the last of these four, signs are different, subtract. The answer will be negative. And we get negative 53 for that. Again, if you want to pause the video, I'll solve them right now. Signs are different, we'll subtract. And the larger number is positive, so our answer is positive. Here, the signs are the same. So we'll add. And keep the sign. Here the signs are different, so we'll subtract. And the answer is positive. Signs are different, we'll subtract. And the larger number is negative, so the answer will be negative. Sometimes you'll have a situation where there's two signs in front of a number. Okay? And my suggestion is just rewrite it as one sign using multiplication rules. These are the multiplication rules. You'll want to have them written down and memorized. I'm going to take them away. And then you can just go back to using the rules for addition and subtraction. And my experience is students get very good at solving with one sign in front of each number. So if there's two signs in front of a number, I'll use the multiplication rules. Positive times negative is a negative. And then, just as I always do with simplifying an expression, I bring down whatever I have not touched. The 9 comes down, the 7 comes down, and everything up here is gone for good. You don't ever have to look at it again. Now you refer back to the rules for addition and subtraction. Let's cover that. Signs are different. You subtract, keep the sign of the larger. And that's the answer. Okay, so whenever there's two signs, I'll use the rules of multiplication to rewrite it as one sign. Negative times negative is a positive. Bring down what I haven't touched. And then I go back to my rules for addition and subtraction. The signs are the same. I add and keep the sign. Okay, so again, negative times positive is negative. Bring down whatever you haven't touched. I haven't touched this negative or the 6. The 4 comes down. Signs are the same. We add and keep the sign. And on the last one, on this one, negative times a negative is positive. Bring down what we haven't touched. Signs are different. Subtract. Keep the sign of the larger. The only time I'm not allowed to just walk up and circle these two signs and give you the result based on rules of multiplication is if I had a situation like this. Let's say I would say, oh, there's two signs, but there's an exponent. Okay? You have to deal with this exponent first. This actually means, just real quick, that you have two sets of parentheses, each with a positive 4. The result of that would be a positive 16, and then you would bring down everything else. But we're not covering that now, okay? But again, as long as that exponent's not there, you can simply rewrite as one sign using the multiplication rules, and you're fine. We'll try this with a number that's a couple numbers that are a little bit bigger. All right, two signs in front of a number. Negative times a negative is positive. And remember, once you do this, everything up here is gone. All right, you don't have to worry about that at all. Signs are different. You're going to subtract. You'll keep the sign of the larger. This one will be positive. So this is our answer, positive 57. We'll try this one. Two signs in front of a number. Using the rules of multiplication, positive times negative is negative. Bring down what you haven't touched. Now you can forget about what's up there. The signs are different. You subtract. Don't forget to borrow. And you keep the sign of the larger. We're going to try two more of these, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Two signs in front of a number. Positive times negative is negative. Bring down what you haven't touched. Signs are the same, you add. And you keep your sign. And then finally this one. Sorry about that. Negative times positive is negative. Signs are different. You subtract. Keep the sign of the larger. All right, now we'll cover how to add and subtract when there's many numbers in one expression. First, I'll do it following the order of operations strictly. That is, proceeding from left to right, doing addition or subtraction. Just deal with the first two. The signs are different, so you subtract, keep the sign of the larger. And now bring down everything that you have not touched. Then you deal with the first two. Negative 2, negative 8. The signs are the same. So you add, keep the sign of the larger, and bring down whatever you haven't touched. Let's see, this negative 5 and positive 7. All right. Now dealing with the first two. Signs are the same. You add. Bring down whatever you haven't touched. And then finally, there's just two left. Signs are different. You subtract. Keep the sign of the larger. And that's your solution. I don't like this method. It's too cumbersome. I prefer to just group together the negatives, add them, group together the positives, add them, and then you only have to do one subtraction. You're allowed to do this because you get the same answer. So the negatives would be 6, 8, and 5. They're all the same sign, so I'll add them. 11, that's 19. And again, that's negative. Alright, so I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this. I have a 4 and a 7 that are positive. Combine them, that gives us a positive 11. And I only have to do one subtraction. On my answer key, you'll see I just scratch a line there. I have the larger on top, and the result is negative 8. As you can see, we get the same result. So this is how I will solve them. If you want to try this one, go ahead and hit pause. I'm going to solve it now. I'll group together the negatives, 29, 17, and 6. And these are my negatives. I get negative 52. So it takes care of that one, and that one. The only thing left is the 14 and the 8. And that gives us a 22. This one's positive, and I just scratch a line. 52, 22. We're left with a negative 30. All right, we're going to solve two more of these problems. This one, if there's two signs in front of a number, I'll rewrite it with just one sign. Negative times positive. This one I leave it alone. Positive times negative. Leave that alone. Negative times negative. Okay? Then I bring down everything I haven't touched. And just to emphasize, you can ignore all that now. You don't need it anymore. Everything that you need is right here on this line. So first I'll group together my negatives, 7, 5, and 9. That's negative. I've taken care of that, that, and that. The only thing left is 3, 2, and 8. And I have one subtraction. So as an answer, we get negative 8. And we'll solve one more problem. If there's two signs in front of a number, let's clean this up. Negative times negative is a positive. Negative times positive is negative. Positive times negative is negative. And then bring down whatever you haven't touched. and then just group together all your negatives, 72, 43, 19. So that took care of the 72, the 43, the 19. The only thing left is 15 and 61. You'll have one subtraction. And another negative. If you're on my website, mrb4math.com, by the way, it's not case sensitive, I've put in worksheets like these, and I always include an answer key.